thought I would establish some ground rules, having given the welcome. First of all, fire escapes. Obviously, the main door through the tower, the north door through the north transept, and if the candidates want to get out quickly, there's a door out the back. Yes, in a moment. And I'm going to ask each candidate to talk only about their own party's policies and not speak about the policies of other parties this evening. And I want to thank those who submitted questions. They came in last Monday to me by last Monday, and I've collated them into themes. As I said, my aim is that we get to know the candidates and what they think is important. I guess if we've got any burning issues, I think they will probably come up in the context of the questions that are asked and the answers that are given. And I'm sure you can always follow that up with an email to one of the candidates afterwards if you've got something specific that they've said that you want to follow up. And please can I ask, we reserve our applause to the end. I don't want to shorten our time together by clapping at every answer to every question. So let's wait to the end. I'm going to try and wrap this up by 8:30. And at 8:30, if you want to, you may wish to give them a round of applause. And again, the other thing is each candidate will have up to 2 minutes to answer each question. And Peter Stevenson, who's kindly hosted this event in the past, is my timekeeper. And he will be coughing loudly at about 30 seconds to go. Would you like a microphone? You will need one. So could you, they've got one for you at the back. You go and get yourself.
Apologise.
That's all right, no worries.
Sorry.
You haven't missed any questions. And so let's get round to personal introductions. And by the way, I'm Martyn Taylor. I'm the rector of St George's. And if you've been around Stamford, you probably know who I am. I've been here 28 years, so I've been here quite a long time. And you're going to see the questions will appear on the screens, and so the candidates will be able to just remind themselves of what I've asked. And in this personal introduction section, your name and your party, why are you standing as an MP, and why are you standing here in Stamford and Rutland? This is kind of about the locality. So, would you like to go first, Emma?
Why not? Okay. Hello, good evening. That's quite small, but I'll need stronger glasses. So, hi, good evening. My name is Emma Baker, and I am your Green Party candidate for Rutland and Stamford. And it says, why are you standing as an MP? Because I was asked to. Back in 2022, I became a Green Party member and was kind of whisked very quickly into putting my name on a ballot paper for South Kesteven District Council, along with my husband, to support his election. And as I said to the young gentleman over there, I actually beat my husband in that election, but it's all right, he was still elected as well, he was third. So yeah, like May last year, it became a bit of a whirlwind, but I've kind of fallen in love with kind of standing up for people that live in my ward in Bourne, but also in Stamford as well, and sort of answering questions and getting things done for you guys. And then when the option came to kind of stand as an MP, I was like, yeah, let's give it a go. It'll be fun, it'll be interesting, and it'll be something that I can say I've done. I'm really, really proud to be a Green Party member and the first in this district ever, and I think that is really an interesting thing. There was a third question on there that I didn't answer. Why this area? Yeah, so I'm a teacher here. I teach drama and dance at Welland Academy. And so I guess I have roots here and a want to kind of support the next generation that live in this area. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Okay, let's go around
158.
to Joe. Let's introduce you.
Prepared my own speech, so it will be in a slightly different order. I hope that's okay.
You've got 2 minutes.
Good evening. Thank you very much for inviting us, and thanks everybody for coming this evening and listening to us speak. My name is Joe Wood, and I'm the Labour Party candidate. I was born in a constituency very similar to this one, a rural constituency in South Wales, where my grandfather owned a farm, and I grew up helping out on the farm in a busy lambing season. I left school and indeed home at 16, and I went to agricultural college and I got a job as a fish farmer. And I did that for a number of years. And then I had a chance encounter which led to me having the opportunity to go overseas and do some wildlife conservation. And it just struck a chord with me. It was a turning point in my life, and I felt that that was my calling, something I needed to do. And so for the next 10 years I worked all across the globe, in South America, in Southeast Asia, in Africa, and here in Europe, on wildlife conservation. And then as a mature student I went back to university and I did a degree in climate change and sustainability, and after graduating I set up my own small business offering sustainability advice to businesses. In terms of why here, well, I think I've mentioned about growing up in a very similar constituency, so I've not been parachuted in from London or somewhere. I understand the needs of rural constituencies, I understand the needs of constituencies like ours, and why wouldn't you want to stand here? It's just such a beautiful, lovely community, and it's a real joy to be here and have the chance to represent people. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We go to James. James.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming. I'm James Moore, the Liberal Democrat candidate at this election. Why did I stand for Parliament? Well, some of you may know that I've spent much of my career teaching history and politics at university. I'm based at Leicester University now. And I've become increasingly depressed about the state of British politics. The sense of a decline, the sense of falling standards, the sense of a lack of honesty in politics. And in particular, I'm passionate about the National Health Service. We once had the greatest health service in the world. Free at the point of access, a universal system of cover, best hospital treatment you get anywhere. And what we've seen really is 2 decades of decline. So my first priority as a Liberal Democrat MP is to sort out the health service. And we'll talk about how we might do that more as the day goes on. Why here? I moved back to the UK in 2012 after working in Egypt for a number of years, and I chose to come back to Rutland. I bought a house down the road at Gleyston, next to Uppingham, and I absolutely love the place. You know, I love every village, I love every church, I love the architecture, I love every field, I love every hedgerow. I think it's the most beautiful part of the world to live in. I feel incredibly privileged to be able to live here. But I want to make sure that we stay a vibrant, successful community. I want us to make sure that there's affordable homes for people. I want to make sure that there's good jobs locally for people so young people don't have to move away. And I want to make sure we protect the environment so we're not throwing sewage in our rivers. We're not destroying our landscapes by unsympathetic building. So I'm standing before you because I just love the area. I care about it and I want to help it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's go to Alicia.
Good evening, everyone. Standing here this evening, I'm asking an enormous thing of you, and that is for your trust. And I don't underestimate what I'm asking. I live in Rutland with my family, about a 10 minutes drive from here. My son goes to a local school here in Stamford, and my daughter is still in nursery. For the last 4 years, I've had the privilege of being a Member of Parliament for Rutland and Martyn. I went into politics because before that I worked in counter-terrorism at the Foreign Office. I secured defections from dictatorships, I worked at UN peace talks to get people out of dangerous places, and I fought to defeat ISIS in Iraq and Syria. That's why I went into politics, to protect our country. And I believe that over the last 4 years I've shown that I'm someone who can do that on the national stage. I was privileged to be elected the first female chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, the youngest woman to ever chair any committee. Now that's a vote of every member of Parliament of all parties. So I hope that shows that in my short time I've shown that I can command the respect of people across the parties. But at all times whilst doing that, I have been focused on what I can do locally. And I have been local, approachable and hardworking, and I have got things done. Now some of those things, fortunately, have benefited you. The upgrades I secured as chair of the A1 MPs working group, bringing together MPs from here to Colsterworth. When you flooded, when you had appalling flooding this year, I brought the flooding minister to Tallington. I went to Gretford. I was the one at 11 o'clock at night trying to find portaloos for the villagers who were suffering so badly because all their toilets had been knocked out. I have worked with you to fight against the Malard Pass because food security, it's a big solar plant affecting many of our villages, because food security is a national security issue, and it is also an attack on the rural way of life that we need. Now, many of you may say, well, MPs don't really make a difference to people's lives. But I'm proud that my team and I have helped over 40,000 people over the last few years, people in real trouble, the darkest times of their lives, but also people who've had policy concerns. And I think maybe that's why when I've knocked on doors, and we've done over 6,000 in the last few weeks, and I wish I looked thinner after doing that many steps, but somehow I don't. A lot of people have said to me, you're that woman that gets things done, aren't you? And I've said, yes, I am that woman. And that's why I'm here tonight. Thank you.
Finally, Chris.
Hi there, everyone. I'm Chris. I'm your candidate here for the Reform Party. I do apologise for being late. I got stuck, funny enough, crossing to the south side of the A1. I can completely see how dangerous it is there. I was coming out of the South Witham junction, and it's insane that nothing has been done for over 14 years to just get that even just extended so that people can pick up speed to join the northbound traffic, and to cross over for the southbound traffic. There was an issue where you can't see the oncoming traffic once you do get into the middle. So I'm surprised more people haven't been severely affected by this. It is a trust thing. It has been poorly implemented there, and there is even just getting the basics down would be a good start. I'm born and raised in Leicestershire and Rutland. I attended school locally near Leicester, and I grew up very much in the area, going and cycling around Rutland Water, being very much a part of the local community here. And that is why I decided to run. I saw a huge amount of frustration locally as the countryside was being left behind. Countryside matters were not being debated, and I thought it is time to make sure that these things do matter. It is time to make sure the countryside is looked after, because it is one of the things that even Vera Lynn sang about. There will always be a country lane, and that is what we are here to protect. It is a way of life. You go to other countries, they don't care as much. The architecture isn't there. It's very much people go to the cities. I know this very much here because I've been in London for the last year, living there. I was on an average salary for the UK on 32 grand. I've come back to Leicestershire, and even with that, I cannot afford a home. You know, even affordable housing now requires a dual income. I either need to find a girlfriend or marry one of my mates. It's a huge frustration. In Lincolnshire itself, affordable housing is classified as 270. I look forward.
So we're going to move on to our next question, which is really about your personal strengths. So I'm going to read a statement, and then you get to use your imagination. Some say that much needs fixing: the environment, NHS, social care, climate change, education, justice, immigration, agriculture, defence, transport, housing, and so on. If you were elected and your party is in government, which department would you feel personally you could contribute to the most positively, and why? So it's about your personal strengths. Which department, if you're elected, would you like to serve in government, and will you make the most contribution? And I've got a list. Not on this one, it's the next one. So we'll go reverse order. Just come on back this way, Chris.
Having grown up with a farming background, my brother is a farmer at the minute, I'm well aware of the difficulties being faced. When I was younger, I worked the harvest. My first job, when I was 13, I went and worked on a dairy farm, being there at 6:30 in the morning to milk the cows. I would cycle up, I was chucked out the door, and that was my life of my summer when I was 13. And then the harvest when I was 16 and 17, and onwards. And this has led me to be very passionate when it does come to farming. That is why I would like to be on agriculture, because I feel that at the minute farmers are not being given their worth. They are being encouraged to create land that is not doing anything. They're expected to pay 120 grand for a machine that can put in wildflowers which come naturally. That is what this SFI scheme has come to. In my view, farming must be about promoting farming. Right now we only supply 50% of our own food in farming. That reform, our goal is 70, but I say why stop there? We should be able to have enough that we want to be exporting it. Even yesterday, the EU decided to start taxing Danish farmers on how many cows they have, to discourage that. So that's a great place to start exporting, because it's going to be cheaper. It is for us to be competitive. When it comes to my personal strengths, it is that. My previous job was as a carbon data analyst, looking in Africa at projects there, and so I've got an analytical mind. My degree is in engineering. It is about getting these things right, but it is about getting the basics right and not pursuing a political agenda when it comes to agriculture, and that is what I'm here for. Thank you.
Thank you.
Emma, over to you.
Fabulous. Okay, I think as a Green Party member, everybody is going to say climate change. No. As a teacher, everyone would probably say education. No. Housing, I think. So at South Kesteven District Council, I am on the Housing Committee, and it is one of my major passions. And if we can get housing right in this country, actually climate change is impacted as well. You know, if we can get our houses built to a passive house standard, with our energy coming from renewable energy sources, our bills are going to be lowered so much so that actually we can afford the houses. Do you know that the average house in Stamford is worth £430,000? How is that affordable for anybody when the average salary in this country is less than £30,000 per year? That is 12 times your salary. My mum always tells me, oh, it was 3.5 times your salary, that's what you could get your mortgage for. We need more affordable houses in this country. They need to be affordable and they need to be properly insulated with solar panels or with heat pumps, and they absolutely need to be serving everybody and everybody's pocket. Thank you.
Here, again and again and again on the doorstep, and I'm sure my other candidates hear it as well, you politicians are all the same. And I'm never quite sure how to respond to that, because clearly we're not. We come from very diverse backgrounds, we have different skills and experiences. I personally, as I said, I left home at a very young age when we were growing up. I don't need any sympathy, but the truth is, I didn't have secure housing. We were in a caravan. I was a single parent family. We were very poor. We couldn't afford to have the heating on. We didn't go on holiday. We had basics food, and things have got much, much tougher in the intervening years. And it's terrible to see that we've taken that step back, so that nowadays young children today are growing up in coldness without sufficient food security. So if people feel that they want to have a politician with a different background, someone who left school early, somebody who has worked in manual work, somebody who has set up a business and raised a family, then that would be my offering. I suppose I feel about Parliament that it can feel like some sort of debating society where you have two opposing narratives, but absent from that debate so many times is the real scientific, factual world. And with my background, an advanced degree in climate change, then my great passion and my desire to enter politics has been driven by this fear that we don't have people in Parliament who understand science, who understand climate. And that's always been what's motivated me, and that would be what I want to get interested in, because that's where I have professional experience and expertise. Thank you.
Thanks, James, over to you.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to talk about something that's not been mentioned much in this election, but I think is very important, and that's education. Because for me, education is the basis of everything that you can do in life. Without a good education, you're always going to struggle. I was brought up in a classic working class community, a terraced house, an outside toilet in fact, I grew up with. But I love learning, I love reading. And that love of reading and love of learning actually took me a long way. It took me into university, it then took me into an academic career, and it took me to teaching myself at university. And I think one of the greatest industries we have in this country is our education industry. We don't think it is an education industry, but I think our universities are incredibly important. We attract tens, indeed hundreds of thousands of students from all over the world who want to come here because they can get the best education that's available. And I think we need to cherish those universities and develop those universities, but not just the universities, but we also need to make sure our schools work, all our schools. Not just for the elite, not just for the top 10%, but for absolutely everybody. And I'm afraid, as someone who's an admissions tutor on degree programmes, I can tell you, having read applications from students who are doing A-levels and are trying to get into university, there's a very uneven level of achievement in our schools. Even people who are getting reasonably good A-levels, when they come to university, are really struggling. So I want to fix that. I want to fix our education system and make sure our universities continue to be the best in the world. Thank you.
Well, I think there's no question that my natural background, of course, is foreign policy and defence, and I'm proud of the things I've done. I was in Ukraine 10 days before the renewed illegal invasion because I was sure it was going to happen. We were trying to convince our partners on the ground, not Ukraine, but others. I helped create the Homes for Ukraine programme. I brought 400 Ukrainian families here to Rutland and Stamford and the neighbouring areas. I've also helped prevent war in the Balkans, and I was the only politician in the world who said in January last year that we were going to see the Gaza crisis of 2023. And I warned governments worldwide to take action to prevent it. No, I didn't see it happening as it did, but I was able to warn about it. But the thing about being an MP is you can't limit yourself to one department. It is your job to fight for people when departments let them down. And that is what my team and I spend 80% of our time doing, challenging government departments when they let people down. So actually the question is really asking, where do you want to be a minister? Where do you want to make a difference? We need to fall back in love with the art of being a backbench MP. I have turned down 2 opportunities to be a minister. Why? It wasn't the right time, it wasn't the right department, it wasn't what was right for our communities. As a backbencher, you can fight on a different issue every hour of the day, and that's why I fought to stop lone births during the pandemic when women being forced to give birth on their own and husbands were forced to be in the car park. That's why I forced to change our solar policy in this country. I've made sure that farmers, we have hair coursing banned as a crime. I've made sure that when it comes to justice, that spiking is made individual offence. I have worked across department after department after department, 2.5% defence commitment. That was part of 20 of us working together.
30 seconds.
The ends of all sorts of appalling things. You need someone who can work on areas they didn't expect to. Procurement is not my area of expertise, and yet I secured 10 law changes within the procurement bill. That's what we have to be able to do as MPs, pick up things, run with them, and make a difference, even if we'd never heard of the issue the day before.
Thank you very much. So coming on to our next question, we're thinking about local affairs now, and I want us all to look forward rather than looking back, but looking forward, what does each candidate believe, and we may have 5 different answers here, what does each candidate believe is the single most important local issue that our constituency faces, and what would they do to improve the situation for local people? And the order is there, starting with Emma, finishing with James. What's the most important local issue that we face?
Gosh, there's so many, and I know that there's so many people in this room tonight actually. So you've got Mallard Pass, and you've got Stamford North, and Quarry Farm, and housing. That's a really tricky question, just choosing one. They all absolutely have their merits, but I'm gonna fall back on housing, actually, and the fact that in this beautiful town, houses are being built on Quarry Farm, and we're having to remove a bund to build an extra 50 houses in Stamford North. It just baffles me that we are putting profit over wildlife in this country at the moment, and I think for me, building should be really about accessing brownfield sites. There are plenty in this area, in this constituency, which would be so much better to build on than the areas that are being chosen to be built on at the moment. And I think when I'm speaking to people, the people that I've spoken to, these are the big issues, particularly in Stamford at the moment. So yeah, I think it kind of hits everything. We need houses, absolutely, and the Green Party are committed to building 150,000 houses per year. It is absolutely needed, but brownfield sites first, over profit every single time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Joe, over to you.
Is my microphone still working? Can people hear me okay? I'm afraid I managed to unplug it.
The mic up. We need a bit more volume, please.
Bit more volume. You can hear me okay now? Well, the issue that comes up most often on the doorstep is the accessibility of primary health care here. But I'll quickly just touch on a second issue, because I noticed recently I'm getting a flurry of very emotional and angry and personal emails from people around solar farm development. And I couldn't figure out why. I've been very, very explicit that I oppose the Mallard Farm development. Labour has no plan to build solar panels all over Britain's agricultural land. That's not part of our GB energy programme. We've been very clear that we're seeking to put solar panels on warehouses, on commercial premises, roofs. And it was brought to my attention last night that the reason why I'm getting these angry personal messages is because there's been an online campaign of misinformation. So I just want to clarify that whilst I'm up here. But the issue that's most important to people that comes up on the doorstep is the access to primary health care. I spoke to a gentleman at the beginning of this campaign who told me he'd been waiting 7 years to get a dentist appointment. And I thought, goodness, that's incredible. But what's even more incredible is I've spoken to person after person after person who can't get a dentist appointment.
30 seconds.
And the same with GP appointments as well. People waiting for a long time and they can't access GP appointments. People complain about the dominance of Lakeside and private healthcare provision here, and it's very difficult to find NHS GP and dentistry appointment. So Labour have a plan. I won't be able to go into it, I've only got 10 seconds left, but have a look at our manifesto, because we are going to be able to not only increase the number of appointments that people can access, but also the way that you access them, so you don't have to queue up at 8 o'clock in the morning hoping you can get through on the phone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and over to Louise. Thank you.
So the new constituency is 3 counties. So the areas are rather diverse because at the extreme, it neighbours Leicester. So your Tugbys, your Stotons, your Hotons, the Bushbys, all the way across, of course, to Little Ponton, Great Ponton, Kirkby Underwood, and of course Rutland in the middle. So there is one unifying issue that I hear across all those doors, and it's about rural disadvantage. It's about the core funding formulas that come to our counties that determine how much money our councils have to spend on supporting us. So the formula goes all the way back to the early 2000s. It's based on deprivation. Now, rural areas come off worse when it comes to deprivation, but if you've seen rural poverty, you will never forget it. And we have a real problem with social mobility, because if you are in an urban centre and you've got a difficult upbringing or a difficult background, you can walk to an apprenticeship, you can walk to a school, you can walk to a library, you can walk to a training opportunity, you can walk to a job centre. But if you're in a small rural community, it is enormously hard to lift yourself out of that and to create the future that you want. So rural disadvantage is the core. And what does that underpin? It underpins everything from healthcare access, it underpins everything in terms of broadband, it underpins our roads, it underpins every single aspect that people are frustrated about when I talk to them on the doorsteps. So that is the number one thing we have changed. And I'm really proud that in the time that I've been an MP, I got the £23 million in Levelling Up funds for Rutland and Stamford that was so controversial, it was the main news story on Radio 4 that morning. How dare the Conservatives give money to Rutland and Stamford, they don't deserve it. But we are the least socially mobile place in the country. So I'm proud of that money because it's building new bus routes, it's bringing people to new economic centres, and it's supporting people to tackle rural disadvantage. And that's what I'll do here, including things on healthcare, where I've saved my local hospital, reopened one, and have secured a new GP practice as well in Martyn.
Thank you. Chris, over to you.
Personally, I agree with Joe here, the PPC for Labour, that the NHS and access to healthcare is one of the biggest issues facing not just our counties, but the entirety of the country. Particularly in Rutland, where the museums have had a particularly, where the hostels have got a particularly bad report as somewhere to go in. It is very important in Rutland and in South Kesteven, and areas which have over 15% of people, both related or part of military. You have people who have mental difficulties, who have had physical ailments that have come from being in the military and not giving them the access to the healthcare they need, especially right now during Armed Forces Week, it's extremely disappointing for somewhere with such an emphasis on the military and with such a rich history to do with it. At Reform, we believe that always at the point of service, it will be free. But as mentioned there by the Labour candidate, there is a lot of private healthcare. Already, at the minute, the NHS uses 10% of operations are done privately, but it is still free at the point of care. We have the ability to utilise the private healthcare system for the public, for everyone, so that if you are waiting for more than 2 weeks for a consultation, you are given a ticket to go and see a private healthcare consultant. There, it is utilising the facilities we have, the not-for-profits. It is trying to get everyone, both the NHS, the private side and the not-for-profits, all to work together. Because together we will be able to achieve much more, cover a wider range of ailments, and be able to cover all of these issues that are faced by everyone and veterans. And so I leave you with that. Thank you.
Thank you. James.
Well, it's always difficult when you go fifth, because everyone's said everything, haven't they, practically? But actually, I agree with Mrs. Kearns about the importance of getting a fair financial deal for our local councils. I'm not sure who's been in government for the last decade, but I should not be too critical, I suppose, in this forum. Quite seriously, I think GPs are a massive issue. We've had a lot of discussions about this, of course, in Stamford, about the inadequacy of local coverage and the problems with one surgery that's already been named. The Liberal Democrats would approach this by training 8,000 extra GPs to cover the gaps, and they target those areas that are already, as we can see, underprovided for. We give you a guarantee on GP access, a legal guarantee enshrined in law, that if you have an urgent condition, you will see a GP within 24 hours. If you have a non-urgent condition, you'll get a GP appointment within 7 days. That will be a legal guarantee that's backed up by funding and backed up by those 8,000 extra GPs that we'll train. We'll also make sure that the hospital system, that is often so overwhelmed, is supported by a proper social care system. We'll set up a national system of social care that will mean people aren't stuck in hospitals looking for care. Will mean that there's actually people in the community who can look after people who need to come out of hospital and take the pressure off the NHS. And we feel those two major reforms, more GPs and a national system of social care, will help transform the NHS and get it back on its legs again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next question moves on to local poverty. And somebody wrote in to say, in Stamford there are 3 voluntary organisations providing food for those in need. It's easy, of course, though, to claim we've got the resources to end poverty. The question is, how would you work in government to make sure that those in greatest need in our local community can afford food for their families and stay warm in winter and have a home to live in? And I'm going to start with Joe.
I had really quite a shocking conversation not very long ago with a young man on the doorstep here in the centre of Stamford, a person who suffers with severe epilepsy, and he's tried really hard to work, but he keeps having to quit his jobs because he has fits on a regular basis. And he told me that with his personal independence payments that he has, he's careful to budget, but he ends up every month with 4 days, consecutive days, where he eats nothing. And he was a small, skinny, unhealthy looking person. And so I think reforming our welfare system so that people who are genuinely in need, who are trying to work but can't, who are really disabled, we can't accept that in the 5th richest country on the planet, people are going multiple consecutive days and not eating. And I can see George in the audience. I've visited your voluntary programme. It was really lovely to see people coming together and creating a communal space where people can mix and have some social contact and get a solid meal. And I don't want that to go away. It's lovely to see communities coming together in that manner. But nobody should have to use a food bank. In 2010, there were 37 food banks in this country, and now there's over 2,600. That's not normal, and it's becoming normalised, and I find that really quite disturbing. We have to do something to ensure that, especially working people, nurses and public sector workers, are not having to use food banks. So I think that would be a top priority, and we need to make sure that, as I said, the benefit system is there to secure and help people who are genuinely needy and are doing their part and trying to work and do the right thing.
Thank you, Alicia.
None of us want to see anyone living in poverty, and that is why every time I come across someone who looks like maybe they're not getting the support they need, we move heaven and earth to support them and to get them the support they need. That's why I've worked with the Rutland Food Bank, why I've visited them, and I've said to them every time, and the same to Citizens Advice, who I've got a good relationship with as well, every time you have someone come in where you don't think they're getting all the support they need, ask them to walk over to my office, ask them to call. We will go to their home, and that's what we've done. We've done all sorts of deliveries of food packages and support and brought clinicians to people. We have done what's been needed to help those people who have been in trouble. None of us want food banks to exist, but it's not a surprise when energy bills have gone up so much that we're seeing increased support, and that's why we stepped in and we paid people's energy bills. We paid and supported over 50% of all jobs in Rutland and Melton were paid for thanks to the furlough programme, so people didn't find themselves homeless or in trouble. We brought in the national living wage, which has been a fundamental transformation in this country. And when it comes to universal credit, when was it most tested? In the pandemic, where hundreds of thousands of people were very quickly able to sign on and get support, and it was delivered. You didn't see front pages saying people can't access the support they need all of a sudden in a crisis. The system worked, and I was really proud that it was able to do that. But we all want to see an end to food bank. We all want to see the end to people in poverty. But that is why, whether it's a pregnant mum turning up at my office 2 weeks before Christmas saying, I'm freezing, my landlord has switched, the boiler's broken, he won't come and fix it, and he won't answer my calls. We gave her all the heaters from our office, and then by Monday, her landlord installed a new boiler because I made sure he knew he had to do it. That's the kind of MP I am. I fight for people. I do not leave them in trouble, regardless of any background or anything else, because that is why I got into politics, to help people.
Thank you. And we come to Chris.
In 2023, in Rutland, there was 27 recorded homeless people in total. It is amazing to see that when we have so much housing available when it comes to someone who is a migrant, who has come here on a boat. We need to be looking after our own people first. And there are many ways of doing that, not just making sure our own homeless can get somewhere to live, but promoting being able to get them to the point where they can afford food too. We need to promote free education for mature students so that we can put them in and learn a life skill to get a job where they will be able to afford to live. But sometimes they may not do that. Sometimes there may be a disability involved, there may be social care involved, they may be looking after someone, which is where it is then up to the state and the local community as well to be brought together to create organisations to bring people up and work together. It is something that sadly was left to the past with the social care when it comes to looking after people locally. It is something that the government really needs to focus on as we move forward. It is horrific to see anyone in poverty and on the street in this day and age. I remember at university only a few years ago the amount of homeless in Oxford that millions in homelessness charities were raising, but it didn't seem to have an effect on my 5 years at Oxford Brookes. We knew them, we could speak to them.
30 seconds.
And it's there, and they often will have a mental health crisis. So it's all about that support network being there and being a normal part of the society and not looked past. But we need to get them to the point to be able to afford food, to be able to have skills, to be able to have a family, all of the things that we want. Thank you, everyone.
James.
Well, I'm always puzzled about this because we are the 5th richest country in the world. The 5th richest, think about that. And yet we have people who go to bed with an empty stomach. We have children who don't have adequate diets. We have homelessness. We have people who cannot access core benefits, even though they're desperate. We have people having their benefits taken off them for no good reason. My point is that poverty is a political choice in Britain. In some countries it's not. In some countries, the level of poverty of that nation makes it impossible for them to do anything for the poorer parts of society. But we are not that country. We are the 5th richest country in the world. And despite what we think about ourselves, we're actually richer now than we've ever been. And yet we still have food banks. We have more and more food banks every year. We have people not having enough to eat. I invite you to look at our programme for tackling poverty. I invite you to look at what we're going to do to actually make the benefit system fairer, more focused. We're going to remove the 2-child limit that was imposed by the Conservatives to try to tackle the issue of child poverty. We're going to reform carers' allowances to make sure that carers get the support they need. I think many of you will know people who are really struggling looking after a partner or a mother or a father, with almost all their time taken into caring responsibilities and able to go to work. That's also a major cause of poverty, particularly with an ageing population. And locally, I'm going to advocate what I did back in Hinckley when I first became a councillor back in 2007, and that's to have, in this area, have a comprehensive anti-poverty strategy that brings together the council and all the public agencies to make real differences to the lives of ordinary people in Stamford and Rutland.
Thank you, James. And Emma?
Firstly, thank you to all of those people that put services there for those people that are having to access food in ways that is just abhorrent. I think they've said it's 5th wealthiest country, and yet 10% of people hold 50% of this country's wealth. That's not right. And yet, politics in this country is allowing that again and again. In this area, we have the 5th lowest child poverty rate. Woohoo! It's 20%. 20% of our children in this area are living in poverty. I see it every day. I work in a school and there are children coming in with no food in their bellies, no food to go home to. They're not even sure if their parents are going to have their house next week. It's abhorrent. It needs change. The Green Party will change that. We are going to tax more. But guess who we're going to tax? We're going to tax the wealthy people. Those that have assets over £10 million.
30 seconds.
Brilliant. If you have over £10 million, thank you so much. You can pay an extra 1% into this country to support everybody else, get the public services that we all deserve. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we're coming on to climate change with our next question. And there's going to be a follow-up question to this, which will be more localised. But there are a lot of major solar farm applications for agricultural land across this area and beyond. And the question is, what should be done about these? But also, in the wider scheme of things, tackling climate change in general. And Alicia, you have to go first.
So 50% of all solar plant applications in the country are in Lincolnshire and Rutland. 50%, that is an enormous figure. But what are we also? The breadbasket of Britain. We are the people that people rely on to put food on our shelves, because it doesn't just appear. It is the work relentlessly, day after day, every single day, of our amazing farmers and food producers. Now, why are we the breadbasket? We have the best quality land in the country. The idea that this is finite and not a precious resource is absolutely wrong. We have to protect our best and most versatile land. We have to make sure we have food security. That's why we've made it a requirement now for every government to give an annual food security report to Parliament, why we are investing and supporting. I have fought against the Malapar solar plant. Lots of people said, oh, she's a NIMBY, she's a that, she's a this. It is the wrong thing for our communities. 2,100 acres of 12-foot high solar plants, built by a company the most complicit in the genocide of the Uyghur people of any company in this world. They rang my office. They said, Alicia's really causing us a lot of problems. What does she want to drop her opposition? Would she like a swimming pool? Would she like a playground? What would she like? Now, lots of you will say, yes, hell yes, we want a swimming pool. That is an act of bribery of an individual in a public office, and my poor member of staff had to deal with that phone call. The company, the British company they're partnering with, by the way, their real name is GCL Poly, not Canadian Solar, but let them whitewash their name. The company they're partnering with in the UK, the guy has never built a single piece of infrastructure in history.
30 seconds.
He's got 12 companies who have all gone bankrupt, owing people money. So I changed the law in May, so that from now on, solar has a requirement to focus on rooftops, that we cannot build on our best and most versatile land, and that all new developments should have them. But unfortunately, Liberal Democrats have said they're going to roll back restrictions on this. That is in their manifesto. Look at Labour's as well. They've said they're going to make it easier for solar to be built. We have to protect our food production because it's a national security issue. If Ukraine hasn't taught us that, then when are we going to learn it? We need solar in the right place, we will have solar, but we have decarbonised faster than any other country in the world, and I fought for wind to be built back on shore again. I'm no NIMBY, but I will protect food security, and I will protect our communities.
Thank you. Let's go to Chris.
These solar farms should have never been considered in the first place. It shows a gross misunderstanding of how the country works when we do have rooftops to put them on. If we had started putting them on rooftops when we had solar 10 years ago, 15 years ago, like they started in Cornwall, in an area of outstanding natural beauty, we would have much more than what we have now to power people's homes, to reduce bills, to cover all of those. When it comes to the food security, if we are offsetting carbon, the one thing we should be offsetting for the future of the human race would be food. Attacking farming is absolutely no way to go about feeding 70 million people. Right? If we are importing, it is no good. When it comes to net zero, we only produce less than 1% of the world's pollution, but we have not held China, Brazil, India, Indonesia to account. We see the pollution that they give off, and yet our average citizens here are being punished unfairly, whilst others around the globe can just go do it willy-nilly. It is a huge cost. Last year, winter 2022 to 2023, 30,000 people died in their homes by freezing to death because they could not afford their energy bills.
30 seconds.
It is only recently that the energy bills have gone up. They said the renewables will be able to keep it low, but it hasn't. We have the ability to produce our own energy. We were doing it. We have delayed nuclear as well. Nuclear is something that it takes up an extremely small amount of space. The waste area is incredibly small compared to wind turbines. In fact, a wind turbine at the end of its life cycle in the UK will be burnt in concrete factories. It is not buried like many think. Thank you.
Thank you.
James.
Thank you. I think the rule is we're not supposed to talk about other people's policies, but
Let's stop. We're stopping there now. I'm talking about other people's policies.
So, the Liberal Democrats, of course, are supportive of solar power, but as our manifesto makes it absolutely clear, we believe solar power should be on homes, not in fields. That's the primary policy of the Liberal Democrats. There will be some cases where, of course, there is circumstances where solar panels in fields might work, but certainly not in this area, not in the cases that we've discussed. So we're completely against the proposals that have been put forward here. I also want to make the point about climate change more generally. The reason why we're in this situation is that we've had 30 years of basic inaction on climate change. I was digging through my old scrapbooks a few weeks ago, and I came across a letter I'd written to my local newspaper, age 17, in 1989, talking about the Liberal Party's policy on what was then called global warming. This is not a new thing. I mean, the Green Party as well, to be fair, have also been talking about this since the 1980s, as have the Liberals. And you've had successive Labour and Conservative governments who have come in and used all the nice right words, passed laws, pretended to do things, but basically have done almost nothing. And that's why we're now having to play catch-up so rapidly, and that's why we're having to make such radical changes, which I think sometimes will be painful economically. I think we need to be honest with people that these things aren't going to come free. If we really want to tackle climate change, there will have to be some perhaps lifestyle changes too. But for us, the most important thing is that poor should not bear the cost. It's our principle is that climate change policies, it should be the biggest burden on the broadest back. So we get a fair transition in our economy, but also we take advantage of this transition and use it to drive a new green industrial revolution that will bring jobs not only to this area but across the country.
Thank you, James. Over to you, Emma.
Climate change is the #1 topic for young people everywhere. I have an 8-year-old daughter, and actually I know that I am to blame for this, but she has climate change anxiety. Solar farms are an answer, absolutely, they are an answer, but not on agricultural land. I think, as Alicia says, that needs to be used to grow our food. But there are revolutionary ways across Europe at the moment where they're putting solar panels over car parks. What an amazing use of space. The Green Party, by 2030, want to have 70% of our energy through wind power, offshore and onshore. We as a party know that that transition is going to be difficult. Okay? But we have to learn lessons from the 1980s when we had our miners' strikes, and we have to work with the unions and with the workers to make the transition from fossil fuel into green energy.
30 seconds.
We are going to save so much money by using renewable resources. They are there forever, which means we can continue to innovate. We can continue to employ thousands and thousands of people into green infrastructure in this country. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Joe.
Well, on the issue of solar plants, I think I've covered it already, and I just invite people to consider that sometimes political parties will use fear tactics, they will try to find a wedge issue, and they will misinform people about that issue. So just bear in mind that maybe when people are claiming online that I'm a firm and my party is a firm supporter of slathering Lincolnshire and Rutland in solar panels, they're not being entirely truthful. Because the truth is that solar is already a very mature technology and it's dominated by the Chinese. It's not really a technology where we can add innovation and where we can compete in the UK. So the idea behind our GB Energy, which I think is a really transformational policy, is that government and business working together can drive investment into the new next level technologies that are going to reindustrialise our country, that are going to spread opportunities around the country and not just keep them in the southeast and in the service sector. There's all sorts of emerging technologies. There's a YouTube channel called Just Have a Think, which I recommend. I'm not saying that this is the technology that we're going to settle on, but there was a plant constructed in Manchester. This plant scrubs air, just bog standard air, to remove any bits and bobs, chills it to such a low degree that it becomes liquid, pumps that liquid air through a pipe that has a temperature differentiation, turns it back to steam, and it powers a power plant from fresh air. So these are the kind of technologies that are out there, but they're not yet ready for market. So with business and government working together through GB Energy, we can reindustrialise, create those quality jobs, and make sure that the socially useful technologies come to market, and that we, in the UK, the country of the Industrial Revolution, are the country that leads on the green Industrial Revolution. Thank you.
Well, thank you to all the candidates. I'm just going to ask for a poll now from all of you, and this is because of a question that's been asked from the floor. Could you raise your hand if in government you would oppose Mallard Pass? So we've got that, all 5 candidates. So I've now got a question related to how you're going to do that. Okay.
Oh.
It's a nationally significant infrastructure project with an overdue decision, waiting for a new government. Okay, we're waiting for a new government to make a decision on it. Now, in practical terms, how are you going to go about this? Given that you're all against it, how are you going to go about influencing the result that will be given that your views may not be aligned with those in your party, and the final decision is already overdue? So, who wants to go first?
Yeah, go on. I think for me this is about actually why that land was sold or is being sold in the first place. And for me that's because we're not paying our farmers well enough. Agricultural land is not as can't think of the word, sorry, gone blank. But it's not as profitable as it was. You know, I was sort of speaking to somebody the other day that told me that they were actually selling milk for less than it takes to produce. I mean, that's just wrong. So as a party, I know that the Green Party are about investing 3 times more in our farmers. And so for me, it is about going to the farmers and saying, please, we want your land to grow food on, and we want to make it profitable for you and worthwhile, not putting solar panels on that land. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a reminder, it's about what are you going to do to oppose this in government if you're in government. Okay, you've answered now, so you've got a chance, but I'm just reminding the other candidates. Anybody? Joe?
Well, it's an unusual thing for an aspiring politician to say. I really love getting out and communicating with people. I have a strong fear, a concern about the state of our country and the direction of travel, and I want to try and use my platform and my skills and experience in my own small way to try to change things. So forgive me for talking about the sort of crude reality of real politics. I don't like it, but it is what it is. And 2 facts, I suppose, that are really pertinent to this case are that we have a 2-party system under first past the post. I wish we didn't. I don't like it. But realistically, we're going to have a Labour or a Conservative government next time round. And politicians are not known for their generosity. They don't go out of their way to make the life of opposition MPs easy, to give them wins in their constituency. And so I think if we're talking in crude transactional terms, with Labour having had a 20-plus point poll lead for 2 years now, it's very likely, and this isn't me being arrogant, it could still not happen, that the next government will be a Labour government. Labour currently has 2 rural constituencies, and it's always bothered me that Labour's not better represented in rural areas. And I'm asking people to consider who will be better able to leverage influence with the incoming Starmer-led government. Who's going to have more influence to oppose this project and get it scrapped? And my contention is that if we have a Labour government and a Labour MP, the first one ever here, I will be able to utilise and leverage that position most effectively to make sure that that project doesn't go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah.
Having previously worked in the European Parliament on both agricultural policy and economic and monetary policy, it is about targeting, for this project specifically, for Mallard Pass, because it is so large, it has skipped all of the planning processes and went straight to the Ministry of Energy. So it is in essence getting to that person, talking to people, trying to get people on board who are in the Parliament with me. It is going, and it will be trying to make friends with probably people who won't necessarily agree with me, But it'll be going to them, it'll be lobbying DEFRA, it'll be trying to get the farmers on board, to write emails, but it is all targeting that one person for this project. Because it skipped everything else, including yourselves. And that's where the great frustration is. It's turning around to people and saying, this was not done through democratic due process. The people are being ignored. The local people that it affects, the people who live in that area because they want to be there, you know, they won't, and they won't like anyone who does support it, frankly. So it would be going there. It would be building bridges. We say I'm new to UK politics, that's fine. But at the end of the day, it will be trying to speak across party for me, with the Conservatives, with Labour, with Green, and saying to them all, your candidates who I was running with all agree with me that this is something that is so bad that we should get rid of it. Give them a ring, they agree with me. And so it'd be building that momentum up towards the top levels to get the person, whoever the Minister of Energy is, I don't know the full job title, it is saying to them, no, this cannot go ahead. There are better alternatives. Thank you.
I'll give Alicia now, please.
Yep. It's almost as if none of you have ever heard of an opposition MP. Jess Phillips, no, none of us have ever heard of her. She's never changed the law while she's been in opposition. No. The thing that you need to do is, day one, sit down with Sue Holloway and the amazing Mallard Pass team. What do we immediately do? I write an op-ed for the national newspaper saying this is a chance for Labour to prove that when they say they're going to have a human rights focused foreign policy, because that's the only thing that they say in their foreign policy, this is an evidence point of where they are going to do
Sorry,
it.
can I just, we were told that we weren't to talk about,
He talked full-time
many
about
times has been mentioned.
Well, I can talk about some Rutland and Stamford one. Right, I won't name them. Look in all the manifestos, find the manifesto that doesn't use the word rural once, and tell me that that party is going to look after you. The next thing I would do, I would be sitting down with their Miliband and saying to them, I want to talk to you about why this policy is bad. I'd be raising it on the floor of the House at every single question that I can. Prime Minister's questions, at energy questions, at DLUP questions. I'll make sure it is heard. Next thing I'll be doing, coming round to all of you and asking you to sign a new petition. Why? I provided to Parliament the biggest wet signature petition they have ever received. Do you know how we did that? Community group and I worked together and went door after door after door. So I'll get the petition again. There will be op-eds again. I'll be raising it every single one. And if you think I won't hunt down ministers, hear what ministers have said in Parliament about me myself. The most recent local government minister said, well, Alicia, I took the job knowing you were going to hunt me down. Yes, I will. The idea that you can't get things done cross-party is a nonsense. You work, you get things done, you work, you raise your voice. The idea that opposition politicians do not achieve anything is just not true. Look at the amendments that our people get through all the time. The reality is I will put this on their agenda, I won't let them ignore it, and I will fight for us, just as I did with my own party. And if that's how hard I was willing to fight my own party, imagine how hard I'll fight another party.
James. Finish us off, James.
Well, I'm pleased to say that if you look at some of the recent polls, it does look as though Liberal Democrats will be the official opposition next time. So let's see what we can do. But let's be honest. That politics is not just going and shouting at people or arguing. We see far too much of that in the Commons. When you switch on Prime Minister's Question Time, you see people arguing all the time and being rude to each other. But actually, politics is about talking to people and listening to people with different views. And one of the things I'm proud of is that really throughout my life, I've been involved in politics since I was really, as I say, a teenager, helping out, is that I've formed friendships with people from across the political spectrum. You know, my partner is a member of the Labour Party. At university, I was in the same university cohort as Liz Truss, and got to know Liz Truss very well. I knew Daniel Hannan, arch anti-EU campaigner. I was a very much pro-EU campaigner. We were good friends at the time. And we knew each other across parties. And Mark Littlewood now, again, one of my closest friends from university, runs the Popular Conservative with the Conservative Party. So I think one of the great skills a politician has to have is not just going there and arguing and shouting at people. It's being forceful, but being polite, building contacts, and winning their arguments intellectually and rationally across the political spectrum. And as Liberals, we always believe in working cross-party. We believe, actually, parties working together is often a better way of running the country than actually fighting each other constantly. Isn't that a more rational way to do business? So that's the way I would approach this case, by talking across party, presenting the arguments of the community and fighting for this area at all levels. Thank you.
Thank you, James. I'm going to skip a couple of questions I've got on here, and I'm going to go to assisted suicide and safeguards. Okay, so if we can bring that question up for people, and the question is this. We know that in the next government there's very likely to be a move towards assisted suicide with safeguards. So a question on the practicalities of safeguards. How do you expect that any initial safeguards that allow it for limited reasons will be robust and not be extended as it has been in every other jurisdiction where it has been legalised? That's 14 countries. How would you expect the UK to be different to all other countries, especially Canada, and to hold a firm line limiting access to euthanasia and assisted suicide to just those with 6 months to live? And how would you respond to those who argue that the 6-month rule denies freedom of choice and personal autonomy? And what's the value base for your decision? And I've got Emma to go first.
We're going to swap.
Is that okay,
Yeah, Joe, you go first. That's fine.
Is that okay?
Yeah, you can swap over.
Now, this is something that I feel very strongly about. I have in my own family somebody who sadly suffers from a serious degenerative illness. They have no prospect of getting better, and it's deeply painful to see somebody that you love and that you respect losing their mental and physical health. And I've long been a very strong proponent of assisted suicide. I'm not sure about the 6-month rule. I hadn't heard anything about that. But, I mean, we have in place legal guarantees to protect people's property rights, for example, where you can have a professional third-party diagnosis of capacity. And I just would envisage that the same thing would be used in terms of assisted suicide. So one thing that I would be opposed to, though, there was a very high-profile case in the media recently where a young lady, it was a horrible case, who suffered from acute mental health problems. I myself have suffered with mental health problems in the past, and I know that feeling of you don't want to carry on and you don't think it's going to get better, but I don't accept that that's a terminal condition, so I would not support assisted suicide for people in mental distress. But I think if you are seriously ill, if you have no prospect of getting better, you are denied a dignity and a kindness that even a pet can receive in this country, and that can't be right. So yes, it's very likely that if there was a vote, it would be a matter of conscience, and so it would be a free vote. You'd be unlikely to be whipped in one direction or another, and I would vote almost certainly in favour of a bill to legalise assisted dying. Thank you.
Sorry, it's very emotional, isn't it? I'm going to be really honest. I've got an issue. My sister-in-law is very, very poorly today, and is actually currently having life surgery that might save her life. So,
do you want to skip the question?
No, I'm okay. Wow. I think you answered that question beautifully. I think it is a matter of conscience, and I genuinely don't know how I feel about it. And I think if it came to a vote, I would actually abstain, because as a Christian, somebody's life being taken away is difficult. But I turn to the Bible, and the Bible doesn't actually give me an answer either way either. In one passage it says yes, and in one passage it says no. I'm a trained drama therapist, so I deal with people that are at end of life. Sometimes I've done end of life life story work with people, and nobody deserves to suffer.
30 seconds.
But yeah, that is my answer. I'm sorry. like sit on the fence. That is it.
Thank you. Can I remind you, this is really about safeguards, and how do we protect safeguards that won't be weakened over time, such as in Holland or in Canada? And it's Alicia to go next.
So this is a deeply personal issue that comes up time and time again, and I have to say I have had thousands of people write to me while I've been a Member of Parliament about this. All but I think about 15 asked for assisted dying to be introduced. I've spoken quite passionately about this in Parliament because we have a local man called Phil in Rutland who went all the way to the Supreme Court for the right to end his life. He has motor neuron disease. And they said it is not for courts to decide, it is for Parliament to make the judgment. So it is time that we have a vote in Parliament. We need one. From my own perspective, and this is a conscience issue, for me this is about a shortening of suffering. Your body has turned on you. You will die. Every day you are being racked with pain. The Hippocratic Oath says do no harm. Yet some people with these extreme conditions, they are having harm done to them. And the last words my mum said to me 2 years ago when she died was, I can't go on like this. Please stop it. That's what she wanted, and that was right that she had the choice, but it should be imposed on nobody. So in terms of safeguards, we have very different legislative systems to those other countries. So if we brought in a law with all the right protections, which is multiple doctors signing it off, no personal connections, absolutely mental health should not be a reason for someone ending their life, we could not change those without reopening them in Parliament again and having another substantive vote on a specific amendment. That would require government to bring forward a second bill at another point of time. Bills are very rarely reopened. Bills very rarely come back. So it is not like other systems where we can slip into changes as you have seen in other systems. And I do believe that we can bring in a carefully constructed, very specific, very carefully monitored and very small programme. No one should ever feel that they are being forced into it. People should always be protected, but I do think we have a fundamental right to decide our own deaths if our body is torturing us and we are being suffering on an everyday basis.
Thank you, Alicia. Chris? Yes.
Sorry, I know everyone's not had the opportunity, but it's an upsetting topic for some. Is it possible to move on to the...
No, please, thank you. Yeah.
I know sorry.
You ready to go? You don't. Not everybody has to answer your question if they don't want to. So, James, you wanted to go on this?
I'll just say something briefly.
So, Chris, go first.
I think I am actually in, with my colleague here from the Green Party, Emma, I am in full agreement with her. For me, it would be a very difficult decision to make. Because I know what you're referencing when you say Canada, where Canada's at the point where you have TV adverts for euthanasia. And it's a distressing thing to hear from that country, that it has become sort of, so common and so sort of normalised, when actually most people have people who really do care for them, and it is often distressing if someone says they do want to go away, when people really do care about them. Often people don't realise how much they might mean to a community, from the smallest hello to walking by to going and getting your biscuits from the shop. Everyone means something to someone out there, but you may not know it. And I would really probably struggle with it. I know that many people in other countries, the argument for it has been even down to mental health, and I think every person, when it comes to mental health, should be given a chance. It is a tough thing, depression, anxiety, and things that could potentially debilitate someone and make their lives difficult coming from within them to the point they want to give up. But I do believe that when it comes to mental health and preventing that and safeguarding and saying we will not let you on the mental health thing. When it comes to a debilitating disease, I do think it can be a very tough decision to make. But for me, with the safeguarding, it should not be resigned to a third party. Thank you, everyone.
James.
Thanks. I mean, I find this very difficult, and it does bring up all sorts of memories for me about a friend that I lost in his 20s who had a terrible condition, died a very long and quite harrowing death, really. I suppose to answer the question, objectively, I feel that there's actually no way that you can prevent slippage of law, because the situation the rules we have in Parliament is no Parliament can bind its successor, so Parliament can always change the law. The only way I think you can safeguard Parliament from changing the law and allowing this sort of slippage is by having something like a Royal Commission, where there are deep reflections on the issue from people across the political spectrum, from different churches, from community groups, from different medical organisations, from those who advocate assisted dying, to try to build some sort of consensus how we might move forward. And then perhaps that consensus could be more permanent and would not be changed every 2 or 3 years when this issue comes up. I agree there might be a case for having multiple signatures as a way of protecting people, but my worry about this is that, I've had wonderful elderly relatives who, when they've got towards the end of their life, they've been infirm, they've not been able to look after themselves, they've kept saying, I'm a terrible burden, and of course they're not. Just the opposite, they're a joy. But
30 seconds.
That's my worry, that people be put under pressure, and I'm not sure how you can safeguard against that.
Thank you, James. I'd like to go back to a question on the NHS, which is a national issue. And I don't want us to go over the last so many years of government. This is about looking forward. This is where we are. So let's not argue about how we got to where we are, but let's look forward. How do you propose to fix what some describe as the broken NHS, both locally and nationally? It's a local and a national issue. So I'm going to start with James, if that's possible. James.
Thank you. I've talked about this already. It clearly is something that very close to everyone's hearts. We all grew up with the idea we had the best NHS in the world, and look at the state we're in now. People can't get GP appointments. People worry about ambulances coming when they call for them. People worry about waiting on trolleys when they get into A&E. We've put together essentially a national plan to resurrect the NHS. So I suggested it's 8,000 new GPs. It's a new system of GP training so that we're getting more people coming through our great British medical schools. It's making sure that we have a proper hospital building programme. I won't mention Boris's 40 hospitals. We've all been told all sorts of stories about what might happen. Well, we want a guaranteed programme of hospital building, hospital modernisation. I look around the country, I look at places like Leicester, the Victorian facilities are just completely unacceptable. The buildings and infrastructure is just not good enough for a modern health service. So that's important, but we also want to do perhaps the less fashionable things, such as deal with the issue of social care. And social care is putting huge pressure on NHS. So many people, when they get older, they don't necessarily have relatives, or don't necessarily have people who can care for them locally. There's not the actual social support there for carers to come into the homes to actually look after them. Often the carers themselves are not particularly well trained, they don't really understand the job as fully as they ought to. There are some great carers, don't get it wrong, but frankly the overall level of training is often quite low. So we'd actually set up a national carers college, a bit like the Royal College of Nursing. We have a Royal College of Carers, so carers would get proper training, but in return they'd actually get a proper income as well. So we'd actually raise the minimum wage for carers, and that we think would take pressure off the NHS. But that's not the only solution. We still need to actually be training more people and getting more doctors and nurses in the system, and we need to start now. Simple as that.
Thank you, James. Emma.
Sorry, I think I've composed myself.
Well done.
So, the NHS is on its knees, isn't it? And I see people going, let's just privatise it. No, I think, as James just rightly said, it is a national treasure. The fact that we can go into a doctor, if we can get an appointment, and see somebody face to face and know that this is not going to cost us anything. I bring in our co-leader Adrian. He said on Monday that if we want Scandinavian levels of social care in this country, we cannot be doing it on US levels of tax. So it comes to funding, doesn't it? Okay, and the Green Party are absolutely determined to fund our NHS properly. So, in the first year, we are promising £8 billion of extra funding into the NHS. That's rising to an extra 28 billion by 2030. It's not just about money though, is it, as James said, it's about education and incentives for our doctors and our nurses, and we as the Green Party are also determined to put in £20 billion for our social care sector as well. And as James has already said, that will take a massive pressure off our NHS and allow it to be something that we can continue to be proud of in this country. Thank you.
Okay, Joe, thank you. Over to you. Looking forward, Joe.
Well, the NHS was something which was created by the Labour government, and it's our proudest achievement, and it holds a very special place in the culture of our party, and it's something that all Labour people feel very, very strongly about. And it's still something which is quite rare internationally. There aren't that many countries that have managed to pull off a National Health Service. I think I'm going to start actually, because everybody agrees that the NHS is in a poor state and we all agree that it needs to be fixed, and the question that comes up so often on the door, people have lost faith over the last 14 years. People don't always believe that the changes that we're promising can be made. So let's start off with how we'd fund that change. Every year, hundreds of billions of pounds of tax are avoided or evaded. And if we can close some of the loopholes that are facilitating that tax avoidance, we can recoup some of that money and we can invest it into our National Health Service. And that's what we're planning to do by changing the rules around non-DON tax status. The NHS is desperately understaffed. There are hundreds of thousands of vacancies across the NHS, and so fixing the staffing crisis is an immediate priority. People struggle with access to the NHS. I spoke to a young mother today who had to take her child to Grantham for a hospital appointment.
30 seconds.
That can't be right. So we need to create, and we will create, another 2 million appointments per year across the NHS. In Rutland and Stamford constituency, 59% of people who are diagnosed with cancer will start their treatment within 62 days of that treatment. That's a government target. It should be 85%. So we need to double the number of cancer scanners so that people can get a quick diagnosis.
Thank you, Alicia.
So we spend £3 billion a week on our NHS, and since 2016 we've increased that amount weekly by £660 million. That is not a small increase in the funding. We have brought in a long-term work plan because we need to make sure we have the plan for how we do work and how we get things done. We have the best health outcomes in the UK are in England. The shortest waiting lists are in England. Yet we have less money to spend per head than other governments. But look at what you can do locally. The problem in Stamford and SKDC is that the Integrated Care Board does not pay enough attention to this area. You need an MP who can do what I've done in Rutland. I went to the ICB and said, you're going to close Rutland Memorial Hospital, but you're not. I'm going to work with you and we're going to make sure that it can be sustainable. Within 2 years, I got that commitment from them to save Rutland Memorial and got £1.5 million extra investment into it. Then I went and worked in Medbourne, where they closed the health clinic, and working with the local councillor, Michael Rickman, I got the ICB to reopen it. I've just secured money to build a new Meditech centre in Rutland, so that the new technologies that we're all going to rely on as we get older to warn a loved one that we're in trouble or something's gone wrong are built here in Rutland. The number of GP appointments in Rutland has gone up 14% since 2019. Why? Because we've worked with those practices who are worst and brought in additional resource from the ICB. Who asked for that and pushed for it? The MP. We gave them additional resource for the receptionist to get it through there. I've already met with Lakeside. I've had a very blunt conversation with them, and they want to do better. So how do we make sure we
30
get them there?
seconds.
You need an MP who will go to the ICB and say, let's put those steps in place, let's make that progress, because also, if the local council really are going to expand, there needs to be additional GP resource. And that's where, in Melton, for example, where 36,000 people served by one GP practice, I got an additional GP practice that will open next year. You need someone who deliver locally on health, and I've got the record of doing that.
Chris.
Obviously, I've spoken a bit already on the NHS to do with dealing with the backlog, but it's looking now within the NHS on what there is to be cut as waste. On average, an operations manager will be earning more than a senior nurse. Imagine going to university, doing all of your nursing, and actually more than junior doctors. Imagine spending all of that time at university to be put under someone who has no idea what you do, but can tell you what to do. These managers the number of them have skyrocketed in the last 5 years in particular. There is waste. They are there to micromanage. I have a friend who's a junior doctor, and he has 3 managers telling him to work extra hours. They say he's got no choice. He's the only one who didn't go on strike in his area down in Essex, and they suddenly sort of went, oh, we can tell them to do as much as we want. Right? It is addressing these concerns, and then with the spending. When the doctors go on strike and the nurses go on strike, they get paid to come back, but they'll get paid 4 times the salary. So it is saying to the NHS trusts, no, you need to start putting that into the salaries. You need to start making it competitive to be a doctor. Doctors used to be able to, they were doing well in the community. They lived in the nice houses. Now they are expected to be the same as everyone else when they have an incredible skill to save people's lives. It is belittling to them. It is something that we want people to want to be doctors out of success, and nurses, to not just be caring, but to be rewarded for it. Along with that, the cap on training for doctors, which hasn't been increased for many years now, we want to encourage the creation of our own doctors at university level. We want to be promoting that. Our university system is huge, and yet the number of doctors being trained within our borders has barely increased in 10, 15 years now.
Thank you.
Well, it's nearly 1:30. This has been enthralling, and I've still got 3 questions left, which would probably take us to another half an hour. So I could put these questions to the floor to see which one would you like me to ask. I've got one question on the CAS report. You understand the CAS report? That's around identity and school-aged children and how they identify and those kind of, how you put protections in place. So that'd be one question. Another question around unintended consequences around hate speech. And a third question about international issues and the geopolitical scene. Okay, well, let me do it by hand. Could you raise your hand, and we'll do it by poll. You can have 2 questions if you'd like 2, okay? CAS report, who wants to hear about the CAS report? Okay, who wants to hear about unintended consequences around hate speech? Who would like international issues and military bases? Yeah, okay, that's the big one. That's where we're going. Final question. Here we go. Are you ready? In an increasingly unsettled geopolitical scene and with various military bases in our locality, how should the UK use its influence and depth of resources to promote peace and stability in partnership with other nations? Starting with Chris.
This comes back to getting the basics right within our borders. If we cannot get the basics right here, how are we meant to project any level of power and have influence abroad? We must get our NHS sorted. We must be able to look after those who are in the army. It is Armed Forces Week at the minute, and they are the ones who are most affected by this. Is it any good if they come home and they cannot be looked after properly? It will not incentivise people into the military. At current, a private in the army only earns $20,000 a year to put their life on the line for our country. So this goes back. We have to look after our military, otherwise our military will not be able to look after us. When it comes to that salary, obviously with reform, we want to raise the minimum tax threshold to 20 grand, take all of the privates, take all of the lower levels of the military out of tax, so that they are being rewarded. That is a very good starting point. When it comes then next, it is, like I said earlier, we need to be able to stand up to China. We need to be able to stand up to other destabilising factors in certain regions. But that, once again, will come from our own strength within our own borders as a united people. But we have to be working together. We have to have everything here sorted. Thank you.
Can we just bring the question up again for the candidates to look at? So, how should the UK use its influence and depth of resources to promote peace and stability in partnership with other nations? Okay, James.
I was talking a few weeks ago to a friend of mine. He's now in his late 70s, but he was involved in developing some of defence technologies protecting ships during the Falklands War. And he reminded me how close a run thing that was. We tend to assume now that it was a relatively straightforward British victory. But in fact, if just 2 or 3 small things had gone wrong, Britain could have either lost that war or won it with significantly increased casualties. And I think we've seen in recent years the problems, particularly of our Royal Navy, the difficulties of the carrier programme, the chaos around the delivery of that programme, our weakened capacity as an international power. Under the Conservatives, we've reduced our army from 100,000 to 75,000. I won't comment about any further on Conservative policy, but the reality, that's a fact. Look at it yourself. Now, if you weaken your Navy, and you weaken your army, and the Air Force is struggling as well on procurement issues, how does that help you promote peace around the world? I'm a great believer in the simple slogan, peace through strength. We're only a free people because we can defend ourselves. And we can only help create the conditions of peace around the world by being strong. The Western democracies have to stand together. We have to recognise that we have a common interest to work together, to build up our forces, to protect ourselves against foreign aggression. Look what happened in Crimea when Russia marched into Crimea. What was the response, the Western response? A very weak response. That just encouraged Putin. That was essentially appeasement. And now we look where we are. We see the horrors of the Ukraine. So my message is simple. We get peace through strength, and we don't undermine our armed forces.
Emma, over to you.
Okay, hi. Well, I have the pleasure of working in a school that has a really firm foundation in the armed forces, with a lot of our students coming in from Wittering, and our CCF programme is an absolute honour to witness, absolute dedication, and I take my hats off to anybody who chooses that profession, because you are amazing people. But I think something that we're kind of missing is actually one of the biggest threats is cyber. Cyber attacks that's the way that our countries are going to be destroyed. And as a Green Party, we actually do have a digital bill of rights that we would like to amend to make sure that all digital spaces are protected. So that is where I think that we need to focus our attentions more on cyber attacks. Thank you.
We're in the era of hybrid warfare. This isn't new. For a long time, every single strata of our society, every part of our society has been under attack. We used to worry about the threat from terrorists who behave like states. The threat now is states who behave like terrorists. And that is why we need the era of deterrence. It is all about deterrence. Lots of people want to talk down Britain. I don't understand why. Because no country in the world has the convening power that we have. I'm just chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee. I'm not that important. And yet when I go to international conferences, I get half an hour to an hour with President Sisi. I get an hour talking to presidents from every single country in the world, prime ministers around the world. Why? Because the UK matters. Not because I matter, because our country matters, and when we speak, it matters. I have helped prevent war in the Balkans in the last few years. I exposed the fact the Serbian government was planning to launch a terror attack on Kosovo 4 months before it happened. And then when it did happen, Kosovo was far more prepared to protect themselves. We have to do more. But when it comes to defence, this is not a story of failure. F-35s, 2 new aircraft carriers, new nuclear submarines coming on board. We don't need a vastly expansive military that is hollow. We need a small, agile and incredibly effective military who can go out to the most dangerous places and protect us. And I'm proud that I have worked with militaries around the world. I'm proud to have been the civilian sat with military individuals who was fighting to keep our country safe. Do not let anyone talk down this country, because you will not find a world leader who does not say they want the UK on their side. It is us that have stepped up in the Red Sea to protect from Houthi terrorists. It is us who are stepping up to protect our lives. And the thing we do best of all is the political work of bringing people together. Who is it that's doing the work to help create a Palestinian opposition, Palestinian representation? It is the British government.
10.
Who is it that ran the UN peace talks? Or was it on time, did you say?
10.
Oh, 10. Who was it who ran the Syria peace talks? It was the UK. Do not ever let anyone talk down what this country means on the world stage, because they are doing you a disfavour and they're talking our country down wrongly. We have a place in the world and we need to stand up and make sure we are making the most of it.
Wow, we're there. We've come in to
One
land.
more.
Oh, Joe. We're nearly there. Go, Joe.
Don't forget about me.
So I missed. Sorry, I missed you out. Sorry.
Well, I certainly don't wish to talk the country down. My grandfather joined the parachute regiment shortly after it was formed, and I'm proud of his service around D-Day in France and in Holland. And many of my close friends joined the army. I grew up in South Wales, and it was quite common for people from my community to go into the army mostly as private soldiers. And we've spoken about the issues with poor pay for our soldiers. There are issues around homelessness or poor quality accommodation and lack of mental health support for veterans that I think need to be addressed. I have to disagree with some of what's been said before. I don't think it's dressing the country down, but let's be honest, we have the smallest military since the 1700s, and we are in an era of conventional warfare, but our army is still geared towards rapid response, small elite units, and that's fine. But we only have enough ammunition stocks, I was told, listening to a general on the news recently, to last less than a fortnight in a conventional war. So Labour has committed to increasing defence spending to 2.5%. We need to increase the size of our military. When the Russians are talking openly on their equivalent of the 10 o'clock news about detonating a nuclear weapon in the Irish Channel, we need to take that seriously. So we do need to build up our military deterrence. Labour are firmly committed to keeping Trident built in Britain with unionised labour in this country. And don't forget, even to me, this was actually a little bit of a surprise, I didn't realise, but it was Labour that got us into NATO. And we've always been a firm supporter of NATO, and we are still a firm supporter, and will keep us in that alliance, which is the best vehicle for keeping us safe, I think.
No, did everybody answer that question? Yes. So, Emma, Chris, Alicia, James and Joe, thank you very much for sharing yourselves. Sometimes, you know, that it touched your heart to have to say what you said, and we saw the genuine emotion in your answers. I want to thank you for making yourselves vulnerable in front of the people of Stamford and Rutland. We appreciate you doing that. Thank you for those, again, who submitted questions. And I hope that...
Will we have an opportunity for a brief 1-minute closing statement each? Or...
No, that's it now. I've finished now. Good try, Joe. Good try. I think if anybody wants to follow something up, it's an email or a conversation with your MP, or actually candidate, you know what I mean. And thank you so much for joining us here at St George's. And now is your opportunity to give them a round of applause for all their hard work.